in the deep vaults beneath fortress monasteries across the Imperium, where shadows cling to ancient stone and the air tastes of consecrated oils and incense smoke, there rest beings who should not exist. They are neither fully alive nor truly dead, suspended in a twilight state between service and oblivion. These are the Dreadnoughts, walking sarcophagi containing the remnants of heroes too valuable to die, yet too broken to live as they once did. And among them, the rarest and most revered are those who fought during the Horus heresy itself, 10,000 years ago, when the Imperium burned and brother slew brother in the galaxy's greatest betrayal. These ancient ones carry memories that span millennia. They witnessed the Great Crusade at its height, when the Emperor of mankind walked among his sons and led humanity toward a glorious secular future. They stood in the presence of the Primarchs before corruption twisted half of them into demon princes. They fought on battlefields whose names are now legend: Istvan, Calth, Prospero, Terra itself. They remember what the Imperium was meant to be before faith replaced reason and superstition devoured enlightenment. Yet when their younger brothers gather around their sarcophagi seeking wisdom, when chaplains reverently inquire about the old days, when chapter masters request counsel on matters of tradition and history, these ancient warriors grow strangely silent on one particular subject. Ask them about tactical doctrines from the Great Crusade, and they will speak at length. Question them about the fighting characteristics of legions long since splintered or fallen, and they will provide detailed analyses. But ask them about the Emperor himself, about what he was like, what he said, what he truly wanted for humanity, and something shifts in their mechanical voices. Answers become vague, memories suddenly unclear, ancient optical sensors seeming to look past their questioners into distances measured not in kilometers, but in centuries of accumulated sorrow. This silence is not accidental. It is not the simple memory loss that afflicts even these superhuman warriors after millennia of stasis sleep. No, this is something more deliberate, more profound, and infinitely more tragic. The Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts won't talk about the Emperor, because to do so would be to shatter the very foundations upon which the modern Imperium stands. It would be to reveal that everything the Imperium has become, a theocratic nightmare of religious fanaticism, ignorant superstition, and brutal oppression, is the exact opposite of everything the Emperor fought to create. These ancient warriors carry a burden heavier than their adamantium shells, more crushing than the weight of centuries. They remember the truth. And in the Imperium of the 41st millennium, truth has become the greatest heresy of all. To understand why these ancient dreadnoughts maintain their silence, we must first journey back 10,000 years, to an age when the galaxy trembled before the advance of the Imperium's military might, and the Emperor's vision seemed on the verge of reshaping human civilization forever. We must understand what the Emperor truly was during the Great Crusade, before myth and worship transformed him into something he never claimed to be, something he actively fought against becoming. Only then can we comprehend the terrible weight these ancient warriors bear, the contradiction they embody, and why speaking the truth they know would be tantamount to destroying everything they've spent 10 millennia defending. The Emperor's imperial truth. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor of mankind stood not as a god, but as the ultimate expression of human potential and scientific achievement. He was a towering figure, yes, possessed of psychic powers that dwarfed even the mightiest psykers. But he presented himself as fundamentally human, elevated but not divine. More importantly, he championed a philosophy that would define the early Imperium's character and shape its expansion across the stars. This was the imperial truth, and it was as much a weapon as any bolt gun or chainsword the legions Astartes carried into battle. The imperial truth was brutally simple in its core assertion. There are no gods. Not in the Materium, not in the Empyrean realm of the warp. Nowhere in the universe did deities exist. The supernatural was dismissed as superstition, Miracles were explained as undiscovered science, and faith was condemned as the enemy of human progress. The emperor demanded that humanity abandon religion entirely, that they cast aside the chains of belief and embrace reason, logic, and scientific method as their guides. This was not presented as suggestion or preference. It was fundamental law, enforced with the same ruthless efficiency that characterized all of the emperor's designs. Space Marines were indoctrinated in the imperial truth from their earliest days as neophytes. The doctrine was woven into every aspect of their training and conditioning. They learned that the universe operated according to natural laws that could be understood and manipulated through knowledge and technology. The warp was presented not as a realm of demons and dark gods, but as an alternative dimension of psychic energy, dangerous certainly, but no more supernatural than a black hole or neutron star. Psykers were tools to be controlled and utilized, not feared as witches or celebrated as miracle workers. Faith, they were taught, was a crutch for the weak-minded, a failure of logic that led civilizations into stagnation and barbarism. This philosophy wasn't mere atheistic propaganda. The emperor had specific, calculated reasons for promoting it. He understood something that most humans couldn't comprehend, that belief itself had power in a universe where thought and emotion could bleed through into real space. The chaos gods in the warp fed on worship, grew stronger with every prayer, every sacrifice, every act of devotion. By denying their existence, by refusing to acknowledge them, the emperor sought to starve them of the psychic energy they needed to manifest. It was a grand strategic gambit, spanning generations, an attempt to weaken the dark gods by convincing humanity to simply stop believing in anything at all beyond themselves and their potential for greatness. The iterators, orators of extraordinary skill, who traveled with the expeditionary fleets, spread this message to every world the Imperium conquered. On countless planets across the galaxy, ancient temples were razed, religious texts were burned, and priests were given the choice to embrace the imperial truth or face execution. This was presented not as oppression, but as liberation, freedom from the lies that had kept humanity divided and weak during Old Night. The emperor positioned himself not as humanity's master, but as its guide toward a rational, scientific future where mankind would claim its rightful place as the dominant species in the galaxy. The Space Marines, who fought in this era, who would later be interred in Dreadnoughts, absorbed this teaching completely. They witnessed the emperor not in the devotional sense of worship, but in the practical sense of following a supreme military commander. When he spoke with them, he discussed tactics, strategy, logistics, the concrete concerns of warfare and conquest. When he addressed his sons, the Primarchs, he spoke of duty and purpose, not divinity and faith. He was powerful beyond measure, brilliant beyond compare, but he was not, by his own insistence, a god. This is the emperor that Bjorn the Fell-Handed knew. This is the emperor that ancient Rylanor served. This is the emperor whose truth was absolute, whose word was law, whose vision shaped the destinies of billions. They fought not for a deity, but for a dream, a secular, rational Imperium where humanity would rise above superstition and reclaim the stars through science and strength. And this is the emperor whose very existence, whose current state worshipped by trillions as the God Emperor of mankind, represents the ultimate betrayal of everything he claimed to stand for. This is why the ancient Dreadnoughts remained silent. Because to tell the truth about the Emperor, they knew would be to admit that the Imperium has become everything he fought against, and that perhaps, in some cosmic irony that would have horrified him, his own apotheosis into godhood was the greatest victory the forces of chaos ever achieved. The imperial truth wasn't just philosophy. It was binding doctrine enforced with lethal efficiency. The emperor created the position of chaplain within the Legiones Astartes, specifically to maintain ideological purity, to ensure that no space marine fell back into the primitive thinking of faith and worship. These chaplains were watchdogs of rationalism, tasked with rooting out any hint of religious thinking before it could take hold. When the Primarch Lorgar, always the most spiritual of the Emperor's sons, began erecting temples and conducting worship ceremonies venerating the Emperor as divine, the response was brutal and swift. The Emperor personally led the Ultramarines to the world of Monarchia, one of Lorgar's greatest achievements, a city transformed into a monument of faith. There, before the assembled Wordbearers' Legion, the Emperor ordered the entire city razed to the ground. He forced Lorgar and his sons to kneel in the ashes, humiliated them before their brother legions, and made it absolutely clear that such worship was not merely unwelcome, it was abhorrent to him. The message couldn't have been more explicit. The Emperor was not a god, would never accept worship as a god, and would destroy anyone who insisted otherwise. This moment, this absolute rejection of divinity, was witnessed by countless space marines, including many who would later find themselves interred in Dreadnought sarcophagi. They saw the Emperor's fury at being worshipped, saw his disgust at religious devotion. How then, they might wonder, during their long centuries of half-sleep, would he react to what the Imperium has become? How would he judge the ecclesiarchy, the imperial cult, the trillions who pray to him daily as the God Emperor? The question is so devastating that even contemplating it feels like betrayal. What these ancient dreadnoughts also know, what very few in the modern Imperium comprehend, is that the imperial truth was itself a lie, or at best, a necessary deception. The Emperor knew full well that gods existed in the warp. He had trafficked with them, bargained with them when he created the Primarchs. He understood their nature, their hunger, their terrible power. But he also understood that acknowledging their existence would give them power, would feed them with the psychic energy of belief and fear. So he lied, crafting a worldview that denied what he knew to be true, gambling that ignorance could be weaponized against entities that fed on worship and attention. This was perhaps his greatest secret, one that would contribute directly to the Horus heresy. When the Warmaster confronted demons for the first time, when the supernatural tore through the veil of reality at Davin, Horus had no framework for understanding what he faced. The imperial truth had left the legions psychologically unprepared for the true nature of the warp, vulnerable to manipulation precisely because they'd been taught such manipulation was impossible. The Emperor's deception, necessary as it might have been, became one of the weapons chaos used to tear the Imperium apart. The Heresy-Era dreadnoughts witnessed this contradiction unfold in real time. They saw the imperial truth shatter as demons manifested on 1,000 battlefields. They watched as their brothers, indoctrinated to believe the supernatural impossible, struggled to comprehend entities that shouldn't exist according to everything they'd been taught. Some broke under the weight of that cognitive dissonance, their rigid materialist worldview crumbling when confronted with horrors that defied natural law. Others adapted, but the trauma of having their foundational beliefs demolished while fighting for their lives left scars that millennia of stasis sleep couldn't erase. These ancient warriors remember the Emperor's grand vision and its fundamental dishonesty. They remember fighting for a truth that was, at best, incomplete, at worst, a strategic deception that contributed to the very catastrophe it was meant to prevent. And now, 10,000 years later, they watch as that failed deception has been replaced by something far worse. Religious fanaticism that the Emperor would have destroyed with the same merciless efficiency he brought to Monarchia. The irony is so bitter, so crushing, that speaking of it risks madness. When younger brothers ask these ancient dreadnoughts about the Emperor's teachings, about the imperial truth, about the secular crusade they fought in his name, what answer can they give? To speak honestly would be to reveal that the modern Imperium is built on the corpse of everything the Emperor claimed to represent. To remain silent is to participate in the greatest lie, the transformation of the galaxy's most militant atheist into its supreme deity. The Ancient Ones are trapped between truth and duty, between memory and necessity, and so they choose the only path that allows them to continue serving. They simply don't discuss it at all. The psychology of eternal imprisonment. To understand why Heresy-Era dreadnoughts maintain their silence about the Emperor, we must first comprehend the psychological nightmare of dreadnought interment itself. The process of becoming a dreadnought is often romanticized in Imperial propaganda, presented as the highest honor a Space Marine can receive. The chance to serve beyond death, to become a legendary warrior whose name will echo through the ages. The reality is far darker, a horror that even the chapter's own battle brothers struggle to fully grasp. When a Space Marine is mortally wounded, his body broken beyond even the extraordinary capabilities of apothecary medicine to repair, he faces what should be death. His spine might be shattered, his organs ruptured beyond regeneration, his limbs destroyed. For a normal human, these injuries would be instantly fatal. For a Space Marine, with their redundant organs and enhanced healing, they represent something worse, a state where death would be mercy, but survival remains technically possible. This is when the chapter's leadership faces a terrible decision. Let this hero die with honor, or condemn him to existence as a dreadnought. The interment process is brutal beyond description. What little remains of the warrior's body, usually just the torso, often not even that much, is carefully extracted from his ruined power armor. His remaining limbs are amputated if they haven't been already lost. His broken body is then suspended in amniotic fluid within a sarcophagus barely large enough to contain what's left of him. His nervous system is hardwired directly into the dreadnought systems through thousands of neural interfaces, each one a pathway for pain as much as for control. His eyes are removed and replaced with optical feeds from the dreadnought's sensors. His voice, if he can speak at all, becomes a mechanical rasp projected through external speakers. What the propaganda doesn't mention is the sensory horror of this transformation. Imagine being able to see, but only through cameras mounted on a walking tank, to hear, but filtered through audio pickups that turn every sound into electronic noise, to speak, but with a voice that's no longer your own, mechanical and cold. Most devastating of all, imagine never feeling anything again. No warmth of the sun, no cool touch of water, no sensation of wind on your face. The Space Marine's sense of touch, once enhanced beyond human norm, is gone forever. They can register pressure and impact through the dreadnought systems, translated into data their brain can process, but it's not feeling. It's information without sensation, awareness without experience. The psychological impact of this transformation is catastrophic. Many newly interred dreadnoughts experience what can only be described as a complete psychotic break. They scream through their Vox speakers for days or fall into a catatonic state, their consciousness retreating from the horror of their new existence. Some never recover, their minds fragmented by the trauma, becoming little more than organic weapons systems that must be carefully managed by the chapter's tech marines. Even those who adapt, who find some way to maintain their sanity and sense of self, carry the scars forever. This is why dreadnoughts spend most of their existence in stasis sleep. The common explanation given to outsiders is that the machinery is too precious to risk in minor engagements, or that the dreadnought's combat effectiveness is too valuable to waste on routine operations. While these factors are considerations, the deeper truth is darker. Keeping dreadnoughts awake for extended periods drives them insane. The extended neural interface with a machine as massive and complex as a dreadnought creates immense mental stress. Conditions like lethargy, confusion, dyschronometria, the inability to accurately perceive the passage of time, and eventually senility set in if the warrior remains conscious for too long. The mercy, if it can be called that, is stasis sleep. Between battles, the dreadnought is returned to the chapter's sanctum, where tech marines disconnect the sarcophagus from the dreadnought chassis and place it in suspended animation. For the warrior inside, this isn't restful sleep in any conventional sense. It's a kind of death, a void so complete that when they're awakened, sometimes decades, sometimes centuries, later, they often don't remember falling asleep at all. Time becomes meaningless, consciousness fractured across spans that would drive any mortal mind to complete insanity. For Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts, this temporal dislocation is magnified exponentially. They've been asleep not for decades, but for millennia. Each awakening brings them into a world they barely recognize, where their battle brothers are strangers, where their chapter's traditions have evolved beyond anything they knew, where the very language has shifted and changed. Imagine going to sleep in one civilization and waking in another, again and again, century after century, until the disconnect between past and present becomes an unbridgeable chasm in your mind. Memory degrades in this process, not just from the biological aging of the organic brain matter kept alive in the sarcophagus, but from the repeated trauma of stasis and awakening. The ancient ones forget, not all at once, but gradually, inexorably. Faces blur together, names become uncertain, events that once seemed crystal clear develop a fog around them, details slipping away like water through clenched fingers. The oldest dreadnoughts sometimes can't remember which of their memories are real and which might be reconstructions. Dreams created by a mind desperate to maintain some sense of continuity across vast gulfs of time. Yet remarkably, certain memories persist with perfect clarity. Battle memories often remain sharp. The weight of a bolter, the satisfying crunch of an enemy's skull under a power fist, the tactical situations that required quick thinking and decisive action. These memories are reinforced each time the dreadnought fights, each awakening that throws them back into combat. But the softer memories, the human moments, conversations with battle brothers, moments of quiet reflection, the emotional context that gave meaning to their service, these fade faster. The dreadnought becomes increasingly a weapon that remembers how to fight but forgets why it cares. A tragic transformation that strips away everything that made them more than mere tools of war. For those rare dreadnoughts who witnessed the Horus Heresy, who fought alongside the Emperor himself, this degradation of memory becomes another reason for silence. How can they speak with certainty about the Emperor when their own minds have become unreliable narrators? The faces of the Primarchs blur in their recollection. The exact words the Emperor spoke grow uncertain. Was that conversation with Rogel Dawn or Guilliman? Did the Emperor really say that? Or is it a memory constructed from hearing others' accounts repeated over the centuries? The Ancient Ones are no longer sure they can trust their own recollections, and the uncertainty becomes another barrier to sharing what they remember. Moreover, the psychological survival mechanism that allows dreadnoughts to endure their existence involves a degree of detachment from their former humanity. To maintain sanity across millennia of metal entombment, they must learn to let go of what they were, to embrace what they've become. This means forgetting, not just accidentally, but deliberately, choosing which memories to hold on to and which to release, because holding everything would drive them mad. The memories of the Emperor, of the Great Crusade, of the Imperium as it was meant to be, these are often among the first to go. Released because keeping them hurts too much, because the contrast with what the Imperium has become is too painful to bear. Some Heresy-Era dreadnoughts have genuinely forgotten what the Emperor was like. Their organic memories faded beyond recovery. Others remember but have convinced themselves they don't. A psychological defense mechanism against the cognitive dissonance of serving an Imperium that betrays everything they fought for. Still others remember with perfect clarity, but have learned that sharing those memories brings only pain. The pain of watching younger brothers struggle to reconcile their faith with historical truth. The pain of seeing the fear and doubt that truth creates. The pain of being labeled heretical for speaking documented facts about the Imperium's founder. The trauma of dreadnought existence, compounded across millennia, creates a situation where silence becomes easier than speech, where forgetting becomes preferable to remembering, where the ancient warriors find that letting the myths persist is less corrosive to their remaining sanity than trying to preserve truth that no one wants to hear. Their silence about the Emperor isn't just political or strategic. It's psychological survival, the last defense of minds pushed to the absolute limit of what conscious beings can endure. Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the burden of being the eldest. Among all the dreadnoughts in the Imperium, one stands apart, not just for his age, but for the unique burden his longevity imposes. Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves is the oldest living space marine in the Imperium, having been interred in his dreadnought sarcophagus in 934 Taunt M31, less than 200 years after the Siege of Terra. Unlike virtually every other Heresy-Era dreadnought, Bjorn didn't just witness the Great Crusade and the Heresy. He walked alongside Layman Russ, fought in the Primarch's own great company, and stood in the Emperor's presence before the galaxy burned. He is, quite literally, the last living link to the Imperium's founding age, the final witness to what came before. This makes Bjorn's silence about the Emperor particularly significant and particularly calculated. When he awakens from his centuries-long sleeps, entire delegations gather to hear his words. Chapter Masters, Grey Knights, even Inquisitors have knelt before his massive form, seeking wisdom from one who knew the Emperor not as myth, but as reality. Yet despite being perfectly positioned to share first-hand accounts of the Emperor's nature, personality, and intentions, Bjorn remains remarkably circumspect on these specific topics. He will speak at length about tactics, about the prowess of various legions, about Russ himself, but about the Emperor. The ancient dreadnaught's responses become frustratingly vague, his normally sharp memories suddenly uncertain. Part of this is calculated self-preservation. Bjorn is intelligent enough to understand the religious and political landscape of the modern Imperium. He knows that the Emperor is now worshipped as divine by trillions, that the ecclesiarchy wields immense power, that declaring the Emperor was fundamentally opposed to being worshipped would be dangerously close to heresy, regardless of its historical accuracy. Even an ancient hero like Bjorn isn't immune to the Inquisition if he says the wrong things to the wrong people. His position provides some protection, but not infinite protection, and he's survived 10,000 years partly by understanding when to speak and when strategic silence serves better. But there's more to it than political calculation. Bjorn carries a burden that few can comprehend. He remembers what was lost. He remembers the Emperor not through the lens of religious devotion, but as a living, present being. He remembers the Imperium's original vision, the secular dream of enlightenment and unity. He watched that dream burn at Istvan, Calth, and Terra. He witnessed the best of his brothers fall to chaos or die futilely defending ideals that wouldn't survive them. He saw Russ, whom he loved above all others, disappear into the warp, chasing a redemption that would never come. The weight of these memories, the knowledge of how comprehensively everything failed, is crushing. In his conversations with younger space wolves, Bjorn sometimes allows hints of this burden to slip through. He speaks of the old days with what almost sounds like weary sarcasm, describing the wolf this and wolf that of modern Fenris, with barely concealed disdain for how much has changed, how much has been forgotten or distorted. The modern space wolves revere him, but they don't understand him, can't possibly grasp the gulf between what he remembers and what they believe. He's become a living fossil, honored but fundamentally alien to the chapter he helped found. What makes Bjorn's situation particularly tragic is that he's known to maintain extraordinary clarity for a dreadnought of his age. Unlike many ancient ones who've descended into confusion or madness, Bjorn remains sharp, his memories intact, his wit and tactical acumen undimmed by the millennia. This isn't necessarily a blessing. It means he can't hide behind the convenient excuse of forgetting. He remembers the Emperor clearly. He remembers the imperial truth clearly. He remembers all of it, which makes his silence about these topics a deliberate choice rather than a failure of recall. The Space Wolves wake Bjorn rarely, perhaps once per century under normal circumstances, more frequently in times of dire need. When he awakens, he's often bombarded with questions about the old days, requests for stories about Russ and the Emperor and the great battles of the past. Imagine the psychological toll of being valued primarily as a repository of historical information, a living encyclopedia, rather than a being with agency and will. Imagine knowing that much of what you could tell them would shatter their faith and serve no practical purpose beyond satisfying curiosity or puncturing myth. Is it any wonder that Bjorn has learned to carefully curate what he shares? There's also the factor of loyalty, not to the Emperor as he was, but to the Imperium as it is. Bjorn has fought for 10,000 years to defend the Imperium of man, whatever its flaws, whatever its corruption of original intent. He's killed heretics and Xenos beyond counting. He's watched the Imperium barely survive crisis after crisis through those millennia. He knows, with a warrior's practical wisdom, that the Imperium's religious fanaticism, however hypocritical relative to the Emperor's wishes, is part of what holds it together. The faith of the imperial cult provides cohesion, morale, and purpose to countless billions. Destroying that faith by revealing its fundamental contradiction with the Emperor's actual teachings and nature might cause more harm than good. This is the calculation Bjorn has made, consciously or unconsciously. Better to let the myths persist than to tear them down without anything to replace them. Better to remain silent about what the Emperor truly was than to destabilize an Imperium that barely maintains itself against countless threats. It's a pragmatic decision, one born of seeing the Imperium survive only because faith in the God Emperor inspired soldiers to hold impossible lines and citizens to endure unendurable conditions. The truth Bjorn could speak might be historically accurate, but it wouldn't be strategically useful. And after 10,000 years of war, Bjorn has learned to prioritize utility over accuracy. Yet there are moments when the strain shows. In rare instances, when pressed by particularly insistent questioners, when asked directly about the Emperor's divinity or desires, witnesses report that Bjorn's mechanical voice takes on a tone that's difficult to interpret, something between bitter amusement and profound sadness. He might make statements that seem oblique or contradictory, offering just enough truth to be honest while remaining vague enough to avoid dangerous clarity. The Emperor was exceptional rather than divine. He had plans for humanity rather than he wanted to be worshipped. These carefully chosen words allow Bjorn to avoid outright lies while not revealing truths that would cause more problems than they solve. The other Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts, far fewer in number and scattered across various chapters, likely watch Bjorn's example. If even the eldest among them, the one with the most direct access to truth and the most authority to speak it, chooses careful silence on these matters, perhaps that silence is the wise course. Bjorn has become not just a living relic, but a model for how ancient dreadnoughts navigate the impossible contradiction of their existence. Witnesses to a truth that their civilization has fundamentally rejected, yet still sworn to defend that civilization against all threats. In the depths of his rare conscious moments, when the neural connections hum and the millennia of memory press against his mind, Bjorn might wonder what the Emperor would think of what he's become. Would he rage at the worship offered in his name? Would he be disgusted by the imperial cult's existence? Or has his own state changed so fundamentally, sitting on the golden throne for 10,000 years, sustained by the sacrifice of countless psychers, worshipped by trillions, that perhaps he no longer objects to what he once found abhorrent? This is a question Bjorn can't answer, and perhaps doesn't want to. Better to remain silent, to let others believe what brings them comfort, and to continue serving as the last of Russ's company until finally, mercifully, his long watch can end. Ancient Rylana, a study in rejection and truth. If Bjorn represents pragmatic silence, born of political necessity and exhaustion, ancient Rylana of the Emperor's children represents something different entirely. silence born of absolute rejection, a refusal to engage with a reality he found fundamentally unacceptable. Rillenor's story, though ending in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, began in the glory days of the Great Crusade, when the Emperor's children truly embodied their name, striving for perfection in all things as their Primarch Fulgrim led them to victory after victory. Rillenor was ancient even before his interment in a Contemptor dreadnought. He'd fought alongside the Emperor during the Unification Wars, battled at Roma and Thule, when Terra was still being brought to compliance under the Master of Mankind's vision. He'd been granted the honor of bearing the Palatine Aquila, becoming one of the first warriors to wear that symbol when the Emperor bestowed it exclusively upon the 3rd Legion. Rillenor knew the Emperor not as a distant legend or a religious icon, but as a commander he'd personally served under, a being he'd stood beside in battle. That connection to the Imperium's founder ran deeper than most could imagine. When the Horus heresy tore the galaxy apart, when Fulgrim fell to the corruption of Slaanesh and led his legion into damning excess, Rillenor found himself betrayed in the most comprehensive way imaginable. His Primarch, the being he'd believed in, the exemplar of perfection he'd followed faithfully, had become a monster. Worse, Rillenor was marked for death not by enemy action, but by his own Gene Father's decree, assigned to the first wave on Istvan III, precisely because his loyalty to the Emperor marked him as unreliable to the New Order. Fulgrim embraced. The virus bombing of Istvan III should have killed Rillenor along with every other loyalist. Instead, the ancient dreadnought survived, trapped in the ruins of that betrayed world, damaged but still functional. While his brothers died around him, while the Coral City burned and the traitors claimed victory, Rillenor descended into the depths beneath the Precentor's palace and vanished from the war. For 10,000 years, he remained there, alone on that dead world, with only his hatred and his memories for company. What sustained Rillenor through 10 millennia of isolation? Not hope of rescue. He knew none would come to a world so thoroughly destroyed and quarantined. Not faith in the Emperor's divinity. Rillenor had known the Emperor as a man, brilliant and powerful, but fundamentally material. And that understanding couldn't be retroactively transformed into worship. What kept Rillenor coherent when such isolation should have driven him into complete insanity was something far more focused. The singular purpose of rejecting Fulgrim's corruption, of maintaining his integrity until he could strike one final blow against the being who'd betrayed everything the Legion stood for. This is what makes Rillenor's eventual confrontation with Fulgrim so significant from the perspective of understanding Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts' relationship with the Emperor. When Fulgrim finally came to Istvan III in M41, drawn by the psychic beacon Rillenor had constructed from his fallen brother's sonic weapons, the Demon Primarch attempted to corrupt his ancient son, to bring him into the fold of Slaanesh's worship. Fulgrim spoke of glory, of transcendence, of the power and pleasure that could be Rillenor's if he would only submit. He invoked their shared history, their brotherhood, the pride of the Emperor's children. Rillenor's response was absolute rejection. Not arguments, not debate, not even acknowledgement that Fulgrim's offer deserved consideration. Just the single word, rejection, followed by his detonation of a virus bomb he'd preserved for exactly this moment. He rejected Fulgrim, rejected chaos, rejected everything the heresy represented. But notably, nowhere in his final defiance did he invoke the Emperor as a god. He identified himself as proud servant of the Emperor of Mankind, beloved by all, a phrase that could mean many things, but doesn't explicitly frame the Emperor as divine. Even in his greatest moment of defiance, even when declaring his loyalty and rejection of chaos, Rillenor didn't speak of the Emperor in religious terms. This wasn't because Rillenor had forgotten the Emperor or lost faith in him. It was because Rillenor's understanding of the Emperor remained rooted in the reality of what he'd witnessed. A great leader, yes, the architect of humanity's greatest attempt at galactic unity, certainly, but not a god in the supernatural sense that the modern Imperium insists upon. R'hllor rejected Fulgrim, not because his Primarch had betrayed a deity, but because Fulgrim had betrayed the ideals and purposes the Legion had once served, had perverted the quest for perfection into something obscene and unrecognizable. What's particularly telling is that when Thousand Sons sorcerers arrived before Fulgrim, witnessing this confrontation, one of them named Vistario recognized something profound in R'hllor's defiance. These Chaos Marines, themselves damned and corrupted, saw in the ancient Dreadnought something their own Primarchs had lost: absolute integrity, loyalty not to power or pleasure or even survival, but to principles. Vistario's decision to help R'hllor complete his suicide attack, to sacrifice himself so that the ancient warrior could strike his blow, suggests that even the damned recognize something worthy in R'hllor's refusal to compromise, to forget, to accept corruption's seduction. R'hllor's 10,000 years on Istvan III serve as perhaps the most extreme example of what Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts carry within them. Memory so powerful, commitment so absolute, that no span of time, no isolation, no suffering can make them surrender what they know to be true. He couldn't be corrupted because he remembered too clearly what the Emperor's children had been before corruption, what the Emperor's vision had encompassed before chaos twisted it. And that memory, that refusal to forget or to allow his memories to be rewritten by 10 millennia of changed circumstances, was both his strength and his curse. Yet even R'hllor, with his perfect clarity and absolute defiance, didn't speak extensively about the Emperor himself. His loyalty was unquestionable, his service beyond doubt, but he didn't testify to the Emperor's nature, or discuss the imperial truth, or attempt to correct the theological distortions that had accumulated over the millennia. Why? Perhaps because R'hllor's rejection was so complete that it extended even to engaging with the question. The modern Imperium's emperor worship was, in its own way, another form of corruption, not as dramatic or damning as chaos, but still a betrayal of what the emperor had actually stood for and demanded. R'hllor rejected chaos, but would he have embraced the imperial cult? The evidence suggests not. In his silence about the emperor, despite his vocal loyalty to him, R'hllor embodied a form of truth-telling that other Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts might recognize and emulate. He demonstrated that one could serve the Imperium, fight for its defense, maintain absolute integrity, and still not participate in the religious mythology that had grown up around the Emperor. His service spoke louder than any theological proclamations could. His actions proved his loyalty more effectively than any worship. This might be the model that other ancient dreadnoughts follow. Let deeds demonstrate devotion. Let silence on controversial theological matters avoid unnecessary conflict. Let the myths persist while actions preserve what actually matters. R'hllor's death, finally achieved after 10,000 years of waiting, wasn't just the destruction of his physical form. It was the last active rejection of corruption by a being who'd maintained perfect clarity across an impossible span of time. With his destruction, the Imperium lost one of its last living witnesses to what it was meant to be, someone who remembered with absolute certainty what the Emperor wanted because he'd fought to achieve it before the heresy made such certainty impossible. His silence about theological matters wasn't ignorance or forgetfulness. It was refusal to participate in a discourse he found fundamentally distorted from the truth he'd witnessed. The collapse of the imperial truth. To understand why Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts won't discuss the Emperor, we must confront the catastrophic philosophical collapse that occurred during the Horus Heresy. The imperial truth didn't just fail, it was systematically demolished, revealed as either a lie or a catastrophic misunderstanding of reality. And in its destruction, it took with it any simple narrative about the Emperor's nature, intentions, or honesty. The Dreadnoughts who witnessed this collapse carry the trauma of watching their entire worldview disintegrate in the fires of the galaxy's greatest civil war. The first cracks appeared at Davin, when Horus was corrupted through the chaos-infected blade wound. The supernatural manifested in ways that Imperial truth doctrine insisted were impossible. Demons walked in real space, entities of pure malice and power that shouldn't exist according to the materialist philosophy every space marine had been taught. The warrior lodges, which had seemed like harmless fellowship organizations, revealed themselves as cult cells spreading chaos corruption. Reality itself seemed to betray the principles the Great Crusade had been founded upon. For the Space Marines who'd been taught that the warp was merely an alternate dimension of psychic energy, seeing demons emerge from it with intelligence, malice, and apparently supernatural powers created profound cognitive dissonance. These weren't random warp phenomena. They weren't undiscovered scientific principles. They were beings of conscious evil that responded to worship, made bargains, and claimed to be gods. The very gods whose existence the Imperial truth had categorically denied. Every engagement with these entities hammered another nail into the Imperial truth's coffin. The truly devastating moment came when loyalist forces discovered that the traitors weren't just rebelling against the Emperor's authority. They were actively worshipping the Chaos Gods, offering prayers and sacrifices, conducting dark rituals that produced tangible results. This was supposed to be impossible. Faith was supposed to be meaningless, superstition with no real power. Yet here were Space Marines, creatures of reason and scientific conditioning, engaging in religious practices and receiving blessings in return. Worse, those blessings worked. Demon possession enhanced warriors beyond their normal capabilities. Dark rituals could accomplish objectives that conventional warfare couldn't. The supernatural, denied for decades, revealed itself to be terrifyingly real. The Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts watched this unfold from the front lines. They fought demons that shouldn't exist. They witnessed brother Marines transformed by possession or mutation, their bodies warped by energies that the Imperial truth claimed were myth. They saw entire planets fall, not to military conquest but to spiritual corruption. Populations turned to chaos worship through a combination of manipulation and genuine supernatural manifestation. Everything they'd been taught, everything they'd believed about the universe's fundamental nature, was demonstrably wrong. But if the Imperial truth was false, what did that say about the Emperor who'd proclaimed it? Three possibilities presented themselves, none of them comforting. First, the Emperor didn't know the truth about the warp and chaos. He was genuinely ignorant of the supernatural's reality, despite his vast psychic powers. This seemed almost impossible, but if true, it meant the Emperor was fallible, capable of catastrophic misunderstanding, perhaps not the omniscient guide humanity desperately needed. Second, the Emperor knew but lied deliberately, crafting the Imperial truth as a strategic deception meant to starve the Chaos Gods of worship. This was perhaps the most likely explanation, but it created its own problems. If the Emperor lied about something so fundamental, what else had he lied about? Could his sons and warriors trust anything he'd told them? The entire relationship between the Emperor and his Space Marines was built on trust, on the assumption that he guided them with complete honesty. If that foundation was false, what remained? Third, and most disturbing, perhaps the Emperor's relationship with chaos was more complex than his sons understood. The creation of the Primarchs had involved warpcraft of the highest order. Had the Emperor bargained with the very entities he then denied existed? If so, his hypocrisy was staggering, and the heresy itself might be seen as chaos, collecting on debts the Emperor had incurred and never paid. This possibility was barely whispered, even among the loyalists, but it haunted those who'd seen enough to suspect the truth. The Dreadnoughts who witnessed this weren't just dealing with tactical challenges or military setbacks. They were experiencing a complete epistemological crisis. The frameworks they'd used to understand reality had been destroyed. The being they trusted to guide them toward truth had been revealed as, at best, strategically dishonest. At worst, potentially in league with the very powers he'd forbidden his sons from acknowledging. And unlike regular Space Marines, who could die in battle and escape this confusion, Dreadnoughts would, carry it forward through the millennia, unable to forget or resolve the contradictions. What made this psychological trauma worse was that the loyalists couldn't even discuss it openly. To question the imperial truth, while fighting to preserve the emperor's Imperium, seemed dangerously close to the doubts that had allowed the traitors to fall. Loyalty demanded absolute trust, even when that trust had been demonstrably betrayed by dishonesty or error. The Space Marines who survived the heresy learned to compartmentalize, to separate what they'd witnessed from what they were supposed to believe, to maintain faith in the Emperor while privately harboring profound doubts about everything he'd taught them. For Dreadnoughts, this compartmentalization became part of their survival strategy. When the Codex Astartes broke the legions into chapters, when the institutional memory of the imperial truth began to fade, when new generations of Space Marines were raised without knowledge of the old secular doctrine, the ancient Dreadnoughts had to decide: reveal the contradictions and risk destabilizing their brother's faith, or remain silent and allow the new religious understanding to take root unchallenged. Most chose silence, either from pragmatism or from their own inability to resolve the contradictions. After all, if they couldn't explain what the Emperor truly was or wanted, how could they guide younger brothers toward truth? The rise of the imperial cult in the wake of the heresy completed the transformation of the Imperium's philosophical foundation. Lorgar's Lectitio Divinitatis, once the text that earned him the Emperor's wrath at Monarchia, became the basis for humanity's state religion. The Emperor, who'd destroyed cities for worshipping him, was now worshipped across 1,000,000 worlds. The supreme atheist had become the supreme deity. The philosophical revolution couldn't have been more complete or more ironic. What could Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts say to this? They'd witnessed the Emperor's absolute rejection of divinity. They'd seen his fury at being worshipped. They knew with certainty that the God Emperor the ecclesiarchy proclaimed bore no resemblance to the being they'd served. Yet they also recognized that this worship was serving a purpose. It unified the Imperium, provided hope in desperate times, inspired sacrifice and bravery in the face of horrors that reason alone couldn't steel minds against. The imperial truth had failed. Perhaps the imperial cult, false as it was, succeeded precisely because it didn't pretend supernatural threats didn't exist. This terrible pragmatic calculation sits in the consciousness of every Heresy-Era Dreadnought. They know the truth, but the truth is useless or actively harmful. The lie works, after a fashion, keeping the Imperium functional if not flourishing. Speaking truth to destroy the functional lie seems like betrayal of everything they fought for across millennia, so they remain silent, or they offer carefully vague answers, or they pretend to forget more than they actually have. It's not cowardice. It's a different kind of courage, the strength to carry contradictions without resolving them, to know truth while allowing lies to persist, because those lies serve the greater purpose of humanity's survival. The psychological weight of this burden, accumulated across 10,000 years, is perhaps why so many Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts eventually welcome destruction in battle. There comes a point where carrying the cognitive dissonance becomes too heavy, where the gulf between what one knows and what one must allow others to believe grows too wide to bridge. Death, for these ancient warriors, isn't failure or shame. It's release from an impossible situation where all choices are compromises and truth itself has become a weapon too dangerous to deploy. The political dangers of truth. While the psychological and philosophical reasons for Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts' silence about the Emperor are profound, we'd be naive to ignore the cold political calculations that also enforce that silence. The Imperium of the 41st millennium is not a place where historical accuracy is valued over religious orthodoxy. Speaking the truth about the Emperor's nature, about the imperial truth, about what the Great Crusade actually fought for, these acts of historical honesty could easily be construed as heresy, and heresy brings the Inquisition's attention, something even ancient and revered Dreadnoughts have reason to fear. The Inquisition, particularly the Ordo Hereticus, has broad authority to investigate and judge any threat to the Imperial faith. While Space Marine chapters enjoy significant autonomy, they are not entirely beyond the Inquisition's reach. Inquisitors have declared entire chapters excommunicate traitores, sentenced them to crusades of penance, or ordered their extermination for transgressions against Imperial doctrine. An ancient Dreadnought's testimony that the Emperor explicitly rejected divinity and would be horrified by the Imperial cult could easily be interpreted as blasphemy against the God Emperor, grounds for the most severe sanction. The ancient Dreadnoughts aren't ignorant of this danger. They've witnessed the evolution of Imperial governance over millennia, seen the Inquisition grow from its humble origins during the Heresy into the vast, terrifying organization it is in M41. They've watched as historical truth became increasingly subordinate to religious narrative, as records were corrected to align with orthodox belief, as dissenting voices were silenced with extreme prejudice. They understand that their ancient status provides some protection, but that protection isn't absolute, especially if their testimony threatens the very foundations of Imperial faith. Consider the practical implications. If a Heresy-Era Dreadnought were to speak openly about the Emperor's atheism and his condemnation of worship, such testimony, from a source that couldn't be easily dismissed as unreliable, would create a crisis throughout the Imperium. The ecclesiarchy would face challenges to its authority. The faith that motivates countless soldiers and citizens might waver. Doubt would spread like virus through the imperial hierarchy. The Inquisition, faced with this existential threat to the imperial cult, would have no choice but to suppress the source of that doubt by any means necessary. The Dreadnought in question might find themselves declared corrupted, their memory banks judged unreliable or tainted by the warp. Their chapter might be pressured to retire them, disconnecting their sarcophagus from its chassis and placing them in permanent stasis out of respect for their service. In extreme cases, the Inquisition might order their complete destruction, citing the necessity of preventing heretical corruption from spreading. Even the most ancient and honored warrior can be unmade if they become a threat to the institutions that hold the Imperium together. Perhaps even more concerning from the Dreadnought's perspective is what speaking the truth might do to their own chapter. Space Marine chapters exist in a delicate political balance with the greater Imperium, autonomous in internal matters, but subject to Imperial authority in broader strategic questions. A chapter that harbored a Dreadnought publicly contradicting the Imperial cult would face intense scrutiny. Their loyalty would be questioned. Their gene seed might be declared suspect. They could find themselves targeted for investigation by multiple arms of the Inquisition simultaneously, their every action examined for signs of heretical belief. For chapters directly descended from traitor legions, like the Blood Angels dealing with their descent from Sanguinius, or the Dark Angels hiding their fallen, the risk is even greater. These chapters already operate under a cloud of suspicion, required to constantly prove their loyalty to overcome the stain of their genetic heritage or ancient failures. An ancient Dreadnought from such a chapter, revealing uncomfortable truths about the Emperor, could be the excuse rivals need to push for their censure or even destruction. The political cost isn't just to the individual Dreadnought, but to everyone who shares their heritage. There's also the matter of the Adeptus Mechanicus and their relationship with ancient technology. Dreadnoughts, especially old patterns like Contemptors and Leviathans, are precious relics whose maintenance requires tech priest cooperation. If a Dreadnought became politically inconvenient, the Mechanicus might find that spare parts become mysteriously unavailable, that routine maintenance encounters unexpected complications, that the sacred oils and unguents necessary for the machine's proper function simply can't be spared. While the Mechanicus officially serves the Emperor rather than the ecclesiarchy, they're not immune to political pressure, and the loss of their support could effectively end a Dreadnought's operational lifespan. The ancient Dreadnoughts have learned these lessons through observation over millennia. They've seen what happens to those who speak inconvenient truths. They've watched as the Imperium's tolerance for deviation from orthodoxy has narrowed with each passing century. They've observed the fate of chapters, individuals, and even entire worlds that challenged established doctrine. These observations have taught them that silence isn't cowardice. It's survival strategy, both for themselves and for the chapters they serve. Moreover, these ancient warriors understand something that younger, more idealistic battle brothers might miss. The truth they could tell wouldn't actually help anyone. Yes, they could testify that the Emperor rejected divinity, but what practical good would come from revealing this? The imperial cult isn't going to disappear because one dreadnought contradicts it. The ecclesiarchy has too much power, too many resources, too deep a cultural foothold to be dislodged by historical testimony. All that speaking the truth would accomplish is creating conflict, doubt, and potentially schism within the Imperium at a time when unity, however based on falsehood, is all that keeps humanity from being devoured by its countless enemies. This utilitarian calculation, that maintaining the useful lie is better than promoting the useless truth, represents a profound compromise for warriors who've been trained since their recruitment to value honor and honesty. But 10,000 years teaches flexibility, and the alternative to compromise is either irrelevance or destruction. The ancient dreadnoughts have learned to live with this compromise, or at least to exist with it, bearing the weight of truth that must remain unspoken, because speaking it would cause more harm than the continued lie. There's also a generational divide at play. The Heresy-Era dreadnoughts existed in a different universe, philosophically speaking, than the modern Space Marines. The current generation knows only the Imperium of religious devotion, of the God Emperor and his divine will. They've never experienced the secular rationalism of the imperial truth. Trying to explain the Great Crusade's actual ideology to them would be like trying to describe colors to someone who's never seen. The conceptual framework doesn't exist in their experience to understand what they're being told. This makes speaking the truth not just dangerous, but potentially meaningless. The audience lacks the context to even comprehend what's being shared. So the ancient dreadnoughts calculate, consciously or unconsciously, that discretion serves everyone better than disclosure. They provide tactical advice, share battle strategies from ancient wars, tell stories about the prowess of various legions and heroes, all useful information that doesn't challenge the religious foundations of the modern Imperium. They dance around the board, dangerous truths, offering vague statements when pressed, maintaining a strategic ambiguity that protects both themselves and the faith of their younger brothers. This pragmatic silence represents a kind of wisdom, hard-won through millennia of observation and survival. The truth is not always liberating. Sometimes, in the grim darkness of the far future, truth is simply another weapon, and wise warriors choose when to draw that weapon carefully, knowing that some battles cannot be won, and some revelations cause more casualties than any enemy attack. The Heresy-Era dreadnoughts have learned this lesson well, and their silence on the subject of the Emperor is the culmination of 10,000 years of hard-earned political understanding. Comparing Heresy-Era loyalist and traitor dreadnoughts, to fully understand why loyalist Heresy-Era dreadnoughts maintain their silence about the Emperor, it's illuminating to examine what happened to their counterparts who sided with Horus and fled into the Eye of Terror. The contrast between loyalist and traitor dreadnoughts reveals that silence isn't universal among the ancient ones. Some speak freely, and their fate demonstrates why silence is the wiser choice for those who remain true to the Imperium. Traitor dreadnoughts, particularly those who became Chaos dreadnoughts or devolved into Hellbrutes, face a fundamentally different existence than their loyalist counterparts. In the Eye of Terror and other warp-tainted regions, time flows strangely, and the corruption of chaos seeps into everything, including the sacred machines that house wounded warriors. Where loyalist chapters carefully maintain stasis systems to preserve their dreadnoughts between battles, chaos forces lack such technology or discipline. The ancient warriors of the traitor legions remain conscious for far longer periods, and that consciousness, exposed to the warp's malign influence, deteriorates rapidly. The transformation into a hellbrute is particularly horrifying. Unlike the reverent interment of loyalist dreadnoughts, where dying heroes are granted the honor of continued service, Chaos forces use dreadnought sarcophagi as punishment or as a way to dispose of inconvenient subordinates. The implantation process is deliberately traumatic, involving warp energies and demonic influences that fuse flesh with metal in ways that transcend mere mechanical integration. The warrior's body doesn't just interface with the machine, it merges with it, becoming inseparable, a grotesque hybrid of meat and metal that lives in constant agony. Hellbrutes and chaos. Dreadnoughts frequently speak about the past, but their testimony is unreliable at best, insane, raving at worst. They remember the heresy, remember the Emperor, but their memories are filtered through millennia of exposure to chaos corruption. A hellbrute might describe the Emperor as a tyrant who deserved betrayal, or as a weak fool whose naivety enabled Horus's justified rebellion, or as any number of things that reflect chaos's distortions rather than historical accuracy. Their truth has been warped beyond recognition, making them unreliable witnesses to the very events they survived. Moreover, Chaos Dreadnoughts pay a terrible price for their continued existence and whatever they say. Where Loyalist Dreadnoughts sleep between battles, Chaos Dreadnoughts are often chained and restrained, kept barely conscious to prevent them from rampaging against their own forces. The madness that afflicts them makes them dangerous to everyone around them. When they're deployed to battle, they're unleashed like feral beasts, attacking anything in their path with equal fury, whether it's enemy or ally. This is what happens when the protective measures that preserve sanity are stripped away, when the psychological burden of dreadnought existence is experienced without mercy or respite. The word-bearers provide a particularly relevant case study. Before the heresy, they were the Emperor's most fervent worshippers, so devoted that the Emperor himself destroyed Monarchia to punish their religious excess. After their fall to chaos, they became equally devoted to the ruinous powers, worshipping the dark gods with the same fanatical intensity they'd once directed at the Emperor. Their dreadnoughts, ancient warriors who remember serving the Emperor, now serve entities they claim are more worthy of worship, more honest in their nature as gods who admit what they are rather than denying divinity while demanding obedience. These word-bearer dreadnoughts speak openly about the Emperor, describing him as a false god, a hypocrite who claimed atheism while displaying divine power, a tyrant who denied humanity the truth of chaos's existence. They argue that the Emperor lied, that his imperial truth was the greatest deception ever perpetrated, that only through embracing chaos can one achieve real understanding of the universe's nature. Some of their arguments even have disturbing validity, pointing out contradictions in the Emperor's behavior and philosophy that are difficult to dismiss simply as heretical propaganda. But these word-bearer dreadnoughts also demonstrate what happens when ancient warriors abandon the discipline of silence. They've become weapons in chaos's ideological war against the Imperium, their testimonies used to corrupt loyalists, to sow doubt, to undermine faith in the imperial system. Their memories, whether accurate or not, serve chaos's purposes. And in exchange for their willingness to speak, they've received only suffering, the eternal madness of hellbrute existence, the corruption of everything they once valued, the knowledge that they've become the very monsters they were created to destroy. The Night Lords offer another perspective, always the most cynical of the legions, caring nothing for the Emperor's vision beyond the opportunity it gave them for violence. Their surviving dreadnoughts remember the Great Crusade with neither worship nor hatred, but with grim pragmatism. They describe the Emperor as he was, powerful, manipulative, using them as tools without particular affection or faith. Their accounts have a certain dry honesty to them, uncorrupted by either religious fervor or demonic influence. But they're also so steeped in nihilism and bitterness that their testimony carries little weight. Who wants to hear that everything was pointless, that the Emperor used everyone, that the entire Great Crusade was just one warlord's grab for power dressed up in grand philosophy. The Emperor's children's remaining dreadnoughts, those few who didn't die like Relanor or descend into complete madness, speak of beauty and perfection lost, of a golden age before Slaanesh's corruption transformed their legion into monsters of excess. But their memories are so filtered through their obsession with sensation and perfection that the Emperor they describe seems like an idealized artwork rather than a real being. They remember him as the epitome of human achievement, the perfect leader, but their testimony is so clearly shaped by their legion's peculiar psychoses that it's hard to extract reliable facts from aesthetic worship. What all these traitor dreadnoughts demonstrate is that speaking freely about the Emperor, whether in worship or condemnation, ultimately serves Chaos's purposes more than humanity's. The loyalist Heresy-Era dreadnoughts, observing this from across the Great Rift and through millennia of occasional encounters with their fallen brothers, have learned a crucial lesson. Once you start speaking about what the Emperor truly was, you open yourself to manipulation, corruption, and the kind of philosophical dissolution that leads to damnation. The traitor dreadnoughts also show what happens when the protective structures of a Space Marine chapter are removed. Loyalist chapters provide not just maintenance and military structure, but psychological support, traditions that help ancient warriors maintain their sense of self and purpose. Traitor legions, splintered into warbands and consumed by internal rivalries, offer no such support. Their dreadnoughts go mad faster, descend into corruption more completely, and lose whatever wisdom their age might have granted them. The institutional framework of loyalist chapters, including the culture of careful silence on dangerous topics, actually preserves the sanity and utility of ancient warriors in ways that the traitors' freedom cannot match. There's also a darker comparison to be made. Some traitor dreadnoughts have been so corrupted that they no longer care about truth at all. They've merged so completely with demonic entities or warp energies that their original personalities are gone, replaced by something that wears their memories like stolen clothes. When these things speak about the Emperor, they're not sharing historical testimony, but rather engaging in psychological warfare, saying whatever will cause the most pain, doubt, or despair in their listeners. They've become weapons in Chaos's arsenal, their ancient memories just more ammunition to deploy against the Imperium. Loyalist Heresy-Era dreadnoughts see these fates and recognize how easily they themselves could have fallen into similar traps. If they'd spoken too openly about the Emperor's hypocrisy regarding divinity, about the lies underlying the imperial truth, about the ways the modern Imperium betrays its founder's vision, they might have found themselves gradually isolated, then declared suspect, then facing choices between compromise and resistance that could lead them down the same paths their traitor brothers walked. Better to remain silent, to preserve whatever integrity they can within the system, than to risk the kind of honesty that destroys both the speaker and everything around them. The traitor dreadnoughts also demonstrate that having the truth doesn't make one wise. Many of them accurately recognize the Emperor's contradictions, the Imperium's failings, the lies that underpin imperial society. But this recognition hasn't elevated them. It's simply given them different chains to wear, different masters to serve, different forms of slavery to endure. Truth without wisdom, honesty without judgment about when to speak and when to remain silent. These qualities lead not to enlightenment, but to damnation. The loyalist dreadnoughts, maintaining their strategic silence, demonstrate that wisdom sometimes means knowing what truths must be swallowed rather than spoken. The mechanics of forgetting, neural decay, and strategic amnesia, while political calculation and psychological survival explain much of the Heresy-Era dreadnoughts' silence about the Emperor, there's another crucial factor we must examine: the physical and mechanical degradation of memory itself. The human brain, even one enhanced by Space Marine modifications, isn't designed to function for 10,000 years, especially when subjected to the unique stresses of dreadnought interment. Understanding the neurology of memory loss among these ancient warriors reveals that some of their silence stems not from choice, but from the simple biological reality that they're forgetting, whether they want to or not. The brain tissue preserved within a dreadnought sarcophagus is kept alive through sophisticated life support systems and carefully balanced chemicals that prevent the worst effects of aging. However, these systems can slow but not stop the gradual degradation of neural tissue. Neurons die, synaptic connections weaken, and the delicate electrochemical balances that encode memory become increasingly unstable with each passing century. For Heresy-Era dreadnoughts, who've existed in this state for 10 millennia, the cumulative damage is staggering. Memory consolidation requires the brain to repeatedly access and strengthen neural pathways. This is why recently learned information feels fresh and easily accessible, while old memories can feel vague or dreamlike. For dreadnoughts, spending centuries at a time in stasis sleep means that their memories aren't being regularly accessed and reinforced. The neural pathways encoding those memories weaken from disuse, and when the dreadnought finally awakens, they find that entire swaths of their past have become uncertain or disappeared entirely. The process isn't uniform. Some types of memories persist better than others. Procedural memory, how to fight, how to operate weapons, tactical decision-making, tends to remain intact because these patterns are reinforced every time the dreadnought enters combat. These memories are embedded in deeper, more primitive brain structures that resist decay better than the neocortical areas responsible for episodic and semantic memory. But the specific context, the emotional details, the exact words someone spoke, these higher-order memories are far more fragile. For ancient dreadnoughts trying to remember interactions with the Emperor, this creates a peculiar problem. They might clearly remember the tactical situation, the battle objectives, the terrain they fought over, but the Emperor's specific words, the nuances of his expression, the subtle meanings behind his commands, these details blur with time. Was it the Emperor who gave that particular order, or was it Rogel Dawn? Did that conversation happen during the Ulanor Crusade or earlier? Did the Emperor explicitly reject worship in that moment, or is that memory conflated with 100 other similar instances? The extended neural interface required to operate a dreadnought compounds these problems. The constant connection to mechanical systems, the translation of thought into machine command, creates what tech marines call interface drift, a gradual alteration in how the brain processes information. Over centuries, the dreadnought's consciousness begins to function more like a machine's logic processor and less like organic cognition. Memory becomes more database-like, indexed and catalogued but stripped of emotional context. The ancient warriors remember facts but lose the feelings, understand events but forget what it felt like to experience them. This is particularly devastating for memories of the Emperor, because so much of his impact came not just from what he said, but from how he made people feel. The Emperor's presence was overwhelming, his psychic power radiating an aura that affected everyone near him. Space Marines describe standing in his presence as feeling simultaneously terrified and exalted, small and yet part of something immeasurably greater. These emotional aspects of memory are exactly what dreadnought existence erodes first. The ancient ones might remember being with the Emperor, but not what that experience truly meant. There's also evidence of strategic amnesia, the brain's self-protective mechanism of suppressing traumatic or deeply disturbing memories. For dreadnoughts who witnessed the worst of the heresy, who watched brother Marines fall to chaos or kill each other over ideological differences that now seem almost quaint, the mind may actively work to bury those memories. This isn't conscious choice, but rather neurological protection against the psychological damage that comes from constantly reliving trauma. The brain essentially decides that certain memories are too dangerous to access and walls them off. Memories of the Emperor, particularly those that would create cognitive dissonance with the modern Imperium's religious orthodoxy, might fall into this category. The brain, recognizing on some unconscious level that remembering what the emperor actually said about religion would create an impossible conflict between historical truth and present loyalty might suppress those specific memories while leaving others intact. This would explain why some Heresy-Era dreadnoughts can discuss the emperor's tactical decisions in great detail, but become vague and uncertain when asked about his philosophical teachings. The repeated cycles of stasis and awakening act like a ratchet, each cycle potentially removing a bit more of what came before. Imagine a document being copied over and over, each generation losing a little fidelity. Now imagine that process continuing for 10,000 years. What remains might be recognizable as deriving from the original, but the details, the nuances, the subtle meanings, all of these have been degraded beyond recovery. The Heresy-Era dreadnoughts aren't being entirely honest when they claim not to remember exactly what the emperor said about divinity, but they're not lying either. They remember remembering, but the actual content has been lost to time and neural decay. Some chapters have attempted to preserve their ancient dreadnoughts' memories through technological means. Memory recording devices, data slates containing transcribed conversations, even augmetic implants designed to store memories outside the organic brain, all have been tried. But these solutions create their own problems. Memories transcribed to external storage lose their immediate, experiential quality. They become facts to be consulted rather than experiences to be lived. And the process of trying to preserve memories can actually accelerate their organic degradation, as the brain begins to rely on the external storage and stops reinforcing the neural pathways naturally. There's also the question of false memories. Psychology has demonstrated that human memory is reconstructive rather than reproductive. We don't recall events perfectly, but rather rebuild them from fragments each time we remember. With enough time and enough retellings, memories can be significantly altered without the person realizing they've changed. For dreadnoughts who've been awakened hundreds of times over millennia, who've told and retold their stories to countless listeners, the original memories may have been completely replaced by the reconstructed versions, which themselves have been shaped by the expectations and questions of their audiences. This is particularly relevant for memories of the emperor. Every time a Heresy-Era dreadnought has been asked about the emperor over the past 10,000 years, the way the question was phrased, the assumptions embedded in it, the listener's obvious expectations, all of these factors could have gradually reshaped the memory itself. If every interrogator assumes the emperor was divine and phrases their questions accordingly, the dreadnought's memory might reconstruct itself to align with those expectations, not through deliberate deception, but through the natural plasticity of memory over time. The Mechanicus recognizes these issues and has developed protocols for preserving dreadnought memory. Regular maintenance includes careful chemical balancing to support neural health, periodic memory exercises, where the dreadnought is awakened briefly to reinforce critical neural pathways, and meticulous record-keeping to cross-reference the dreadnought's accounts with historical records. But even these efforts can't fully prevent the gradual degradation, and the oldest dreadnoughts exist in a twilight state where they're no longer sure which of their memories are real and which are reconstructions, or even hallucinations. For Heresy-Era dreadnoughts, this degradation might be a mercy as much as a curse. The clearer their memories of the Emperor and the Great Crusade, the greater the cognitive dissonance they must manage between what was and what is. Those who've genuinely forgotten the details can serve the modern Imperium without that psychological burden. Those whose memories have been reconstructed to align with modern orthodox beliefs may suffer less from the contradictions. And those few who remember clearly but claim not to have the perfect excuse for their silence. After all, who can blame them for forgetting after 10,000 years? This creates a fascinating dynamic where the ancient dreadnought's actual memory state becomes almost impossible to determine from outside. They claim vagueness about the Emperor's words, but are they genuinely uncertain due to neural decay, strategically vague for political reasons, or simply protecting themselves psychologically from truths they'd rather not confront. Perhaps even they don't know the answer. The multiple factors: biological decay, strategic calculation, psychological protection, and simple fatigue, blending together into a silence that serves all purposes at once. The living witness to contradiction. Perhaps the most profound reason why Heresy-Era dreadnoughts remain silent about the Emperor isn't political calculation, psychological trauma, or even memory decay, but rather the fundamental impossibility of reconciling what they witnessed with what the Imperium has become. These ancient warriors are living contradictions, beings whose very existence challenges the foundational myths of the civilization they've spent 10 millennia defending. Their silence is less a choice than an acknowledgement that some truths are simply too large, too incompatible with present reality to be spoken aloud. Consider what these dreadnoughts embody. They are warriors who swore oaths to a secular crusade that denied the existence of gods. They served an emperor who destroyed cities for worshipping him. They fought to spread the imperial truth, which positioned superstition and faith as humanity's enemies. Yet now, they defend an imperium where the emperor is worshipped by trillions, where the ecclesiarchy wields immense power, where faith is considered humanity's greatest bulwark against chaos. The contradiction isn't just historical, it's existential, woven into the very fabric of their being. How does one serve loyally while knowing that service validates everything one originally fought to destroy? How does one defend an institution built on the ruins and reversal of the principles one swore to uphold? These aren't rhetorical questions for Heresy-Era dreadnoughts. They're lived experiences, contradictions they must navigate every time they awaken to fight for the Imperium. And the only way to manage such contradictions without going mad is to simply refuse to discuss them, to bracket off the parts of their past that can't be integrated with their present. The Emperor himself, in his current state, represents the ultimate contradiction. The being who most vehemently rejected divinity now sits upon the golden throne, sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 psykers daily, manifesting what can only be described as divine intervention through the Astronomicon, through his supposed protection of humanity, through the faith miracles attributed to him. Has he changed? Can a being in such a state still be considered the same person who led the Great Crusade? Or has 10,000 years of worship and psychic sacrifice transformed him into something that resembles what he once denied? These are questions the Heresy-Era dreadnoughts can't answer. They knew the Emperor as he was, but they have no access to what he is now. They can't ask him whether he's accepted the worship or still rejects it. They can't know if the miracles attributed to him are genuine divine intervention, or simply the inevitable consequences of trillions of humans directing their psychic energy toward a single focal point. The Emperor who destroyed Monarchia for worshipping him might be appalled at the ecclesiarchy, or he might have changed his position after 10 millennia of fighting chaos through the very faith he once condemned. Without knowing, the dreadnoughts can't speak with confidence about whether modern worship aligns with or betrays his will. What makes this particularly maddening for the ancient warriors is that they can see arguments for both sides. On one hand, the imperial cult is everything the emperor claimed to oppose: superstition, blind faith, worship of a god figure, the very religious, thinking he waged a crusade to eliminate. On the other hand, the faith in the God Emperor provides exactly what the imperial truth couldn't: a psychological and spiritual defense against chaos's corruption, a source of unity and morale that secular rationalism failed to generate, a framework for understanding the supernatural horrors of the 41st millennium without succumbing to them. Perhaps the most disturbing realization for these ancient dreadnoughts is that the Emperor might have been wrong. His grand vision of a secular, rational imperium, united under scientific materialism, demonstrably failed. The imperial truth couldn't prevent the heresy, couldn't prepare warriors to face the reality of chaos, couldn't provide the psychological bulwarks, that faith in something greater actually does provide. In a universe where gods are real, where supernatural evil has conscious agency and malevolent will, maybe atheism was always the wrong strategy. Maybe humanity needed faith all along, and the Emperor's militant secularism was his greatest mistake. But admitting this, even entertaining the thought, feels like betraying everything they fought for. The Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts didn't just follow the Imperial truth. They internalized it, built their worldviews around it, killed in its name. To admit it was fundamentally flawed would be to admit that their entire early existence was built on false premises, that their brothers died defending a philosophy that was doomed from the start. This is psychologically unbearable, so the ancient warriors simply don't discuss it, maintaining a silence that protects them from confronting these impossible questions. The younger Space Marines don't understand this burden. To them, faith in the God Emperor is natural, unquestioned, the foundation of everything they are. They can't conceive of a time when the Emperor walked among men and commanded that he not be worshipped. When they ask their ancient dreadnoughts about the Emperor, they're seeking confirmation of their faith, wanting to hear that even in the old days, the Emperor's divinity was obvious to all. How can the ancient ones explain that, no, it wasn't obvious, it was explicitly denied? And what now seems obvious truth would have been considered heresy punishable by death. This generational divide in understanding makes meaningful conversation about the Emperor nearly impossible. The ancient dreadnoughts and their younger brothers are using the same words, but meaning entirely different things. When a young chaplain asks, "What was the Emperor like?" he's asking about the divine majesty of a god. When the ancient dreadnought hears that question, they remember a brilliant warlord, powerful beyond measure, but fundamentally material, who would have been outraged by being called a god. They're discussing two entirely different beings who happen to share a title, and any attempt to explain the difference sounds like heresy to the listener, while being historical truth to the speaker. So the ancient ones learned to speak in ambiguities. The Emperor was beyond our understanding. True, but deliberately vague about what kind of beyondness we're discussing. We serve the Emperor's will, accurate, but leaving unstated whether that will included accepting worship. Those were different times. The ultimate retreat into historical relativism that acknowledges difference without explaining what that difference was. These non-answers serve both parties. The questioner gets something that sounds profound. The ancient dreadnought avoids dangerous honesty. There's also a practical impossibility in trying to convey 10,000 years of transformation. How does one explain that the Imperium has fundamentally changed not just in policy, but in its basic philosophical framework? How does one communicate that the current Imperium would be completely unrecognizable and probably horrifying to the Emperor who led the Great Crusade? The magnitude of change is so vast, the transformation so complete, that describing it feels less like recounting history than like describing two separate civilizations that happen to share a name. The Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts have watched this transformation happen gradually, awakening every few decades or centuries to find the Imperium slightly more religious, slightly less rational, slightly further from what it was meant to be. Each individual shift was small enough to rationalize, to accept as necessary adaptation to circumstances. But the cumulative effect, viewed from the perspective of knowing both the beginning and the current state, is staggering. They've witnessed what could fairly be described as the death of one civilization and the birth of another, entirely different one, wearing its corpse like a mask. This makes them tragic figures in the truest sense, beings who know a truth that's irrelevant to present circumstances, who carry memories that have no practical use, except to cause pain and doubt. Their historical knowledge is vast, but it's knowledge of a dead world, a dead ideology, a vision that failed so completely that its very opposite has taken its place. What good does it do to speak of what was when what is has proven more durable, when truth is less useful than the lies that have replaced it? The mercy of silence and burden of witness, As we approach the end of this examination, we must confront perhaps the most tragic aspect of the Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts' silence about the Emperor. It's not just self-protection or political calculation, but a kind of mercy they extend to their younger brothers and to the Imperium itself. These ancient warriors have come to understand, through millennia of bitter experience, that some truths don't liberate but rather destroy, and that protecting others from such truths might be the greatest service they can still provide. Imagine being a young space marine, raised in the modern Imperium, indoctrinated from childhood that the God Emperor watches over humanity and that faith in him provides protection against chaos. Your entire sense of purpose, your understanding of why you fight and die, is built upon this foundation of faith. Now imagine an ancient dreadnought, a living relic you've been taught to revere, telling you that everything you believe is based on a lie, that the Emperor you worship as divine explicitly rejected worship, that the faith you've been taught is humanity's shield is the opposite of everything he wanted, that your entire religious framework would horrify the being you claim to serve. What would this revelation do to you? In the best case, it might create doubt that weakens your combat effectiveness or makes you vulnerable to chaos's whispers. In the worst case, it could shatter your faith entirely, leaving you psychologically defenseless against corruption or simply unable to find meaning in the brutal reality of the 41st millennium. The ancient dreadnoughts understand this danger. They know that truth without context, delivered to minds unprepared for it, causes more damage than lies that provide structure and purpose. This represents a profound philosophical evolution for warriors who were trained to value honesty and honor above almost all else. The Great Crusade-era Space Marines were taught that truth was a weapon against ignorance, that revealing falsehood was always righteous. But 10,000 years has taught the survivors a harder lesson. Sometimes lies serve better than truth. Sometimes deception protects where honesty wounds. Sometimes the duty to those you serve includes protecting them from knowledge they're better off not possessing. The mercy extends not just to individuals, but to the Imperium as a whole. The modern Imperium survives through a delicate balance of faith, fear, and ignorance. Its citizens endure lives of grinding toil, partly because they believe their suffering serves divine purpose, that the God Emperor watches and values their sacrifice. Strip away that belief. Reveal that the Emperor they worship wanted no such worship, and you risk undermining one of the few psychological supports, keeping humanity's vast, decrepit civilization from collapsing entirely. The Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts understand that their silence isn't just about protecting themselves. It's about protecting a system that, however corrupt or contradictory to original intent, is all that stands between humanity and extinction. Yet, this mercy comes at enormous personal cost. The ancient warriors must carry their truths alone, unable to share them, unable to find others who understand the full weight of what they know. They're witness to history's greatest irony, that the Emperor's most vehement atheism transformed into the Imperium's most fervent theism, and they must bear witness in silence. This isolation is perhaps the cruelest aspect of their existence, worse even than the physical horror of dreadnought interment, because it denies them the basic human need to be understood by others. Some of these ancient dreadnoughts might welcome destruction in battle, partly because it would end this isolation. Death means no longer carrying truths that can't be shared, no longer maintaining the exhausting performance of pretending the past aligns with the present. It means release from the burden of being a living contradiction, of embodying the Imperium's betrayal of its founding principles, while simultaneously defending that Imperium against all threats. There's a certain peace in the prospect of finally letting go, of allowing the last witnesses to uncomfortable truths to fade away so that the simpler, more useful myths can reign unchallenged. But until that release comes, the ancient dreadnoughts continue their vigil. They awaken when called, fight when needed, offer counsel when asked, and carefully, strategically, maintain their silence on the one subject that matters most. They've become guardians not just of their chapters, but of a necessary ignorance. Protectors not just against external enemies, but against historical truths that would cause more damage than any Xenos invasion or Chaos incursion. Their silence is their final service to an Imperium that no longer resembles what they fought to create. It's a service rendered without recognition, because acknowledging what they protect others from would defeat the purpose of that protection. The greatest heroes of the Heresy-Era served the Imperium not by sharing their wisdom, but by withholding it, not by revealing truth, but by maintaining useful fictions, not by educating their brothers, but by allowing them to remain in comfortable ignorance. This makes them perhaps the most tragic figures in all of the Imperium, beings whose greatest gift is the silence they maintain, whose deepest loyalty is expressed through what they refuse to say, whose ultimate sacrifice isn't dying for the Emperor, but remaining alive and silent so that others can believe what they need to believe. They carry the weight of truth so that others don't have to, bear witness to history so that others can focus on survival, remember what was so that others can embrace what is without the psychological burden of understanding the transformation. In the end, the question, why won't Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts talk about the Emperor, reveals itself to be not a simple historical curiosity, but a window into the deepest contradictions and compromises that define the Imperium itself. These ancient warriors are silent because speaking would serve no purpose except to cause pain, because truth has become dangerous, because mercy sometimes requires deception, and because the Imperium they defend has become so fundamentally different from the one they fought to create that honest testimony would be indistinguishable from heresy. Their silence is their burden and their gift. They remember so that others can forget. They know so that others can believe. They bear witness in darkness so that their brothers can fight in the light of simple faith. And perhaps, in the grim darkness of the far future, this is what heroism looks like. Not grand gestures or glorious deeds, but the quiet strength to carry impossible truths alone, to serve an ideal long dead by defending a reality that betrays it, to remain loyal to a dream by protecting those who've forgotten it ever existed. The Heresy-Era Dreadnoughts won't talk about the Emperor because they love the Imperium too much to destroy it with truth, because they've learned that some lies serve better than honesty, because they understand that faith, even faith built on historical falsehood, provides something that the Emperor's cold rationalism never could. Their silence is the sound of wisdom earned through 10,000 years of suffering, the last service of warriors who've outlived their own age and now exist only to protect an age they barely recognize from knowledge it cannot bear. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the psychology and tragedy of the Imperium's most ancient warriors, please like and subscribe to the channel. There are countless more stories in the grim darkness of the far future, and each one reveals another layer of the complex, contradictory, and endlessly fascinating civilization that fights to survive in the 41st millennium.